Wow. Okay, so this time around, you guys have really given us a lot to think about with these sources.
Yeah.
It's really interesting what happens when we finally, we've been through a lot of difficulty. We finally get to some peace,
Right.
and then it's kind of like,
Yeah.
whoa, wait a minute. This doesn't feel exactly like I thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
And your sources really touch on this almost like eerie stillness once all that chaos fades.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what we're going to sort of unpack together today.
Yeah, it's a real paradox. We put so much energy into seeking calm.
Right.
We want the turmoil to end.
Yeah.
And then it actually arrives. And we get this weird sense of almost like disorientation.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do today is walk you through
Yes.
why we maybe even subconsciously kind of resist this peace that we've been working towards.
Oh, yeah.
We'll look at the surprising loneliness that can sometimes come along with it. And
Okay.
then we'll talk about how we can actually start to feel safe again. And ultimately, how we can redefine what we really deserve in our lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not about, achieving this like mythical state of perfection or anything.
Right.
It's really about one of your sources puts it. So what happens after the storm?
Yeah.
The external battles are over,
Mm-hmm.
but internally we're still kind of like
Right.
catching up.
Totally.
Yeah. So let's get into it. That initial feeling, when things are calmer, but something just feels a bit off.
Yes.
It's a real thing, right?
It is. And, one of the most insightful things that I got from your sources was this idea of almost like an unintentional addiction
Okay.
to the adrenaline of dysfunction.
Huh.
So think about it, right? You have these intense emotional swings. You're constantly, in your head going back and forth,
Right.
trying to analyze every single text or interaction.
Yeah.
There's the relentless overthinking.
Yeah.
And then we get this little temporary boost from getting external validation.
Right.
So these things can become really deeply ingrained patterns.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, there's actually studies that have shown that the brain releases dopamine,
Okay.
not just in anticipation of, positive events,
Oh, interesting.
but also in response to predictable patterns,
Wow.
even if those patterns are negative.
That is fascinating. I would have thought it was the opposite.
Right. So this actually could explain why familiar chaos can feel almost rewarding
Wow.
on a neurological level.
Okay, so, addiction is a strong word, but the more we talk about this, the more it's like, oh, yeah, okay, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like our systems, they get calibrated
Yeah.
to a certain level of turbulence and like constant background noise.
Right.
And then when that noise just suddenly stops,
Yeah.
the silence can be so jarring,
Absolutely.
like almost wrong.
It is. It's like,
And you're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
yes, exactly.
Wow.
Like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
And your sources talk about how our past environment plays into this.
So, if your early experiences were marked by instability or conflict,
Mm-hmm.
that's what our brain thinks is normal.
That becomes your norm.
Yes.
So consciously, of course, you crave peace.
Yes.
But your nervous system is like, wait a second.
Oh.
This absence of chaos
Yeah.
is unfamiliar and potentially unsafe.
Wow.
So it's almost like the body and the mind, they're still on guard.
Still anticipating the next.
Or next crisis.
Yeah, even if there isn't one.
Right.
So crazy. It's like a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
Gone into overdrive.
It is.
Always on high alert.
Mm-hmm.
And then when there's no threat, there's this void.
Right.
It's like, oh,
You're right.
now what?
Yeah, and one of your sources even talks about how boring can be really uncomfortable
Right.
for a nervous system that's just used to this constant flood of stress hormones.
Yeah. And I can see that too.
Mm-hmm.
Like you might even subconsciously stir up some kind of drama just to feel
Just to feel something
anything. Just something familiar.
that's familiar to you.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
so if our system is wired for chaos,
Right.
is there a risk then that we might actually misinterpret healthy relationships as boring
Oh, yeah.
because they don't have that drama?
Right. That's such a great question, and it's a real risk.
Yeah.
I mean, when your baseline is just set to these high levels of emotional intensity,
Mm.
then you get into a relationship that's characterized by stability,
Right.
clear communication,
Right.
mutual respect.
Yeah.
It can feel really underwhelming.
Yeah.
It's like your internal alarm system isn't being triggered.
Wow.
So you might mistakenly interpret that lack of drama
Right.
as a lack of connection,
Interesting.
or even a sign that something is wrong.
Yeah. And thinking about that, I think about how we feel needed
Mm.
in those moments of crisis.
Right.
If you're always the person that people are relying on in an emergency,
Right.
or if your relationships all revolve around solving problems, navigating difficult things,
Mm.
then peace can feel like a loss of purpose,
Yeah.
like a loss of connection.
It's true.
That quiet reassurance of peace might not.
It doesn't trigger
Same.
the same sense of being needed or valued.
Yeah. And the source makes a really important point that, quiet doesn't always mean safe.
Right.
Our past experiences, they can really make us link stillness with like, oh, this is just a lull
Exactly.
before something bad is going to happen.
Yeah, it's like the calm before the storm.
Exactly. So healing in this context, I really like how they put it. It's like a detox
It is.
from this constant state of alert.
Mm-hmm.
And as anyone who's ever tried to detox knows,
Right.
it can be uncomfortable,
It can.
even unsettling, to have that newfound silence.
To face the silence.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us into the next area,
Yeah.
which is, we've worked so hard for this peace.
Right.
And now it's starting to feel a lot like loneliness.
Yeah.
And your sources talk about how this can happen after you've had a significant change.
Right.
Like leaving an unhealthy relationship.
Yeah.
We're finally setting some firm boundaries with people.
Mm.
But suddenly, that constant interaction, even if it was negative interaction,
Right.
is gone.
It's gone.
And you're just faced with
You're self-aligned.
emotional whiplash.
Yes. And the source talks about moving from like this over-connectedness
Right?
to solitude.
Yeah.
And that shift can be really jarring.
It can.
You finally created the space for peace,
Yeah.
but at first it just feels empty.
It does. And one of the sources brought up a really crucial point about this.
Okay.
It's about how we sometimes misinterpret certain emotional states.
Ah.
So we might consciously or unconsciously equate drama with love
Oh, wow.
or confusion with passion.
Oh, okay.
So when we remove those things
Yeah.
to get to peace,
Right.
there's this emptiness.
Yeah.
And it's like our internal compass is just totally off.
It's spinning.
Yeah, we're so used to the highs and the lows
Yeah.
that a steady state can just feel foreign.
Yeah, it's like we have to unlearn those associations.
And the source talks about the grief that comes with letting go of unhealthy dynamics.
Right.
Even when we know logically, intellectually,
Right.
that they were not good for us.
They were bad for us.
There's still that sense of loss
Here is.
for the familiar,
Yeah.
even though it was hurting us.
Even though it was toxic.
Exactly. And that grief, that can actually be part of why healing sometimes feels so isolating
Right.
rather than empowering, at least at first.
Yeah.
You're stepping away from these patterns, from these relationships
Right.
that maybe defined a big part of your life.
They did.
And even though it's a step towards being healthier,
Mm-hmm.
it can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm on my own now.
Yeah, you're in uncharted territory.
Totally uncharted territory.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, I just want to go back to what's familiar,
Right.
even if it wasn't good for me.
Because at least you know it.
Exactly. At least I know it. But the source makes a really good point about sitting with that discomfort
Yes.
instead of just immediately trying to distract ourselves.
Right.
That space.
That space is important.
Yeah, even though it's uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
that's where the work happens.
That's where the healing happens.
That's where the healing can begin.
Yeah. It's about letting yourself feel the absence
Yeah.
without immediately needing to fill it with something else.
Right. That might just take us back to where we were.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Wow.
Okay, so we've got this ingrained need for stimulation
Right.
that's starting to subside.
Yeah.
And peace is coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But then we might get hit with loneliness.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that?
Well, that brings us to this whole idea of relearning safety.
Okay.
Because feeling uneasy in the quiet
Right.
doesn't mean something's wrong with you.
Okay, that's good.
It just means that your system is still adjusting.
Mm-hmm.
And your sources talk about how your nervous system actually needs time
Okay.
to believe that it's safe again.
Okay.
So, you've got your sympathetic nervous system is responsible for that fight or flight response.
Right.
And that goes into overdrive when you're in a period of turmoil.
Yeah.
So when peace comes in,
Yeah,
it takes a while for your parasympathetic nervous system,
Okay.
the one that's all about rest and calm and digest.
Right.
It takes a while for that to kick back in.
So how do we get that going?
Well, I really love that your source gives these really practical examples
Okay.
of small daily rituals that can help you relearn peace.
Like what kinds of things?
So things like consciously drinking a glass of water really slowly,
Okay.
choosing to interact with people who are really gentle in the way they communicate,
Right.
and crucially, allowing yourself to rest without guilt.
Okay.
I know these things sound almost too simple,
Yeah.
but if you do them consistently, they can really start rewiring your system.
Wow. So powerful, but so simple.
Right. And all of those things that we just talked about, the slow breathing, the gentle interactions,
Mm-hmm.
they actually help activate that parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
So they're counteracting that fight or flight response that got really ingrained from your past experiences.
So we're signaling to our body and mind that it's okay.
That you're safe.
Yeah.
You can slow down.
Right.
You don't need to be in this constant state of alert.
And the source makes a really good point about how true peace isn't about being excited all the time.
Right.
It's about being nourished.
It is.
It's that like steady, quiet sustenance
Yeah.
that helps us to thrive.
It is.
It's not that fleeting high of drama.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that really is important.
Yeah.
Reframing peace as nourishing
Mm-hmm.
instead of exciting.
Right.
Because I think a lot of us think, oh, if it's not intense,
Mm-hmm.
it's not valuable.
Exactly.
But that's not true at all. And also, I love how the source points out that peace isn't passive.
It is.
It's something that you have to actively
Choose and protect.
Yeah.
It takes effort.
to maintain those boundaries, to make choices that are good for us.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's where self-sabotage can sometimes come in.
Yeah.
If we're not used to peace,
Right.
it feels weird.
Unfamiliar.
Yeah, maybe even threatening.
Right.
We might accidentally create conflict
Right now.
or look for drama
Right.
to get back to what feels normal.
Exactly. It's like your internal thermostat is just set to chaos,
Yeah.
and you've got to consciously reset
You
it.
got to bump it down a couple degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love how the source says, forget perfect life.
Right.
Peace is simply the absence of inner war.
Exactly.
It's not about everything being perfect on the outside.
It isn't.
It's about that sense of calm
It is.
and not having that constant battle
Inside your head.
going on in our heads.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's a much more attainable
It is.
vision of peace, right?
It is, because there are always going to be external challenges.
Of course.
But how we respond to those challenges internally
Yes.
is different
Totally.
when we've learned to cultivate that inner peace.
That inner stillness.
That stillness, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And that leads us to the last part, which is redefining what we actually deserve.
Yes.
And this part of the source really spoke to me because it talks about how we can sometimes actually confuse peace with punishment.
Right.
If we've never really known what it's like to have good times
Right.
without that underlying tension.
Without that knot in your
Yeah.
stomach.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's sad, but I get it.
It is sad.
We have these beliefs that we have to earn peace.
Yeah, we've got to deserve calm.
Exactly.
It's so ingrained in us.
It is. And
Yeah.
the source says it so well that you don't have to earn peace.
Right.
And you don't have to prove you deserve calm.
That's right. These are our birthright as humans.
That's right. And it's okay to want more than just getting by.
It is.
The source is saying it's okay to want to actually have joy
Yeah.
and tranquility.
Absolutely.
It's like we're giving ourselves permission
Yeah.
to want good things.
To have good things.
Yeah, and to have them without feeling like we have to suffer first.
Right.
I really love this line that says,
It's okay to get to the quiet part of your life
Yeah.
and say, I'm not used to this, but I want to stay.
Yes.
That is so good.
acknowledging that it's unfamiliar,
Yeah.
but choosing to embrace it anyway.
It's a choice.
Yeah,
It is. It's powerful.
it is. And the closing reflection in the source is beautiful.
Yeah.
It really sums it all up.
Yeah.
Maybe peace isn't loud.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe peace is waking up and not needing to recover
Yes.
from the day before.
Right.
Maybe peace is learning how to exhale slowly.
It's the little things.
It's the little
the
things.
subtle things.
Yeah, and the source contrasts this so well with past experiences
Yeah.
that maybe we called love,
Right.
but we're actually full of pain and turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't hurt.
Right.
And that matters more than anything you used to call love.
Wow.
Powerful.
Yeah.
And the final takeaway, just so reassuring.
Yeah.
You're allowed to feel strange
in your new softness.
in your new softness.
yeah.
That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong.
That's right. It's okay.
It's okay. So it's normal
Yeah.
to feel disoriented.
It's part of the process.
That's part of the process.
Yeah. And, feeling strange in that newfound softness,
Yeah.
it might actually be a sign that you're on the right path,
We're on the right path.
that you're allowing yourself to experience
Something new.
a different way of being.
A different way of being.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that. So as you sit with the listener who gave us these amazing sources.
Yeah.
Think about this. How is your own definition of peace evolving as you're going through it?
Right.
What are those little quiet moments that are starting to feel
Yeah.
really special?
Unexpectedly meaningful.
Unexpectedly meaningful. Exactly.
Yeah.
It just might be, as the source says,
Yeah.
that this might be something really, really big.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.
Thank you.
See you next time.
See you later.
Bye.